Welcome to Global Lens, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. I don't think people understand just how much Canada's future is tied to a single crop and a single trading partner. Canada and China's trade relationship was once a model of mutual benefit. Canada supplied resources, China's economy consumed them. Billions in goods crossed the Pacific, supporting jobs and industries in both countries. But beneath this prosperity, political risks simmered. At the center of the tension, canola, a crop vital to thousands of Canadian farmers and a major export to China. China became Canada's largest canola market, making the trade link both lucrative and dangerously vulnerable. When political disputes erupted, canola was an easy target. China's sudden tariffs and shipment blocks sent shockwaves through Canada's agricultural sector. The message from Beijing was clear: political disagreements would have severe economic consequences. This crisis forced Canada to question its reliance on a single, unpredictable trading partner. The debate now extends beyond canola. It's about Canada's foreign policy and economic future. Influential voices like Mark Carney are calling for a fundamental rethink of Canada's alliances. The canola conundrum is no longer just a trade issue, it's a national reckoning. Canada must now confront tough choices about its place in a rapidly changing world. The golden fields of the prairies are tied to global politics like never before. The stakes for Canada's future have never been higher. China's tariffs on Canadian canola weren't random, they were retaliation for the arrest of Huawei's Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver. Beijing's response included detaining 2 Canadians, escalating the conflict into hostage diplomacy. Canola became a tool of diplomatic leverage, with China citing dubious technical reasons for trade restrictions. The timing was no coincidence. Canadian canola had long met Chinese standards. Suddenly, major exporters lost their licenses, and steep tariffs priced canola out of the market. China had been buying 40% of Canada's canola exports. Its closure created a massive surplus and plummeting prices. The impact was immediate: farmers' incomes dropped, supply chains strained, and the industry was thrown into crisis. This was economic coercion, not a subtle nudge. China's strategy, targeting sensitive industries to create domestic pressure, has been used against other countries too. The canola tariffs were a textbook example of weaponized trade. For Canada, it was a sobering lesson in the risks of economic dependence. The era of benign global trade is over. Middle powers like Canada must now navigate a world where trade is a tool of power. The tariffs devastated Canadian farmers, especially in the prairies where canola is the main cash crop. The loss of China as a customer caused prices to collapse and left farmers with unsold surpluses. The pain rippled through the entire agricultural ecosystem. Grain elevators, transport companies, and ports all suffered. Small towns dependent on agriculture faced economic uncertainty. The government responded with financial aid and trade missions, but these were only temporary fixes. No other market could replace China's demand. The crisis forced a painful reassessment. Relying on a single market is risky. Calls for diversification grew, but shifting crops and markets is slow and costly. The canola crisis exposed the perils of global trade when politics intervened. Farmers and exporters are now wary of political risk in international markets. The lesson: prosperity built on a single export market can vanish overnight. Canada's agricultural future depends on learning from this harsh reality. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England, weighed in on the crisis. He argued the canola dispute is a symptom of a global shift, where economic decisions are inseparable from geopolitics. The era of hyper-globalization is over. Great power competition now shapes trade, technology, and finance. Carney warned that countries like China use economic leverage for geopolitical gain. For Canada, this means adopting a more strategic, clear-eyed approach to international relationships. Passivity is no longer an option. The risks of neutrality are too high. Carney called for deliberate choices about alliances and values. The canola crisis showed the dangers of being reactive. Canada must link economic and foreign policy, building alliances with countries that share its values. This marks a major shift from Canada's traditional multilateralism. The debate is no longer about canola, it's about Canada's place in a divided world. Carney's proposal is for Canada to realign with a coalition of like-minded democracies. This isn't about abandoning global trade, but making it more resilient and secure. He envisions supply chains for critical goods routed through trusted partners, countries committed to democracy and open markets. This friendshoring approach prioritizes reliability over short-term efficiency. Canada's traditional partners, the US, UK, EU, Australia, Japan, would be central to this network. New trade agreements could include standards on labor, environment, and data governance. The goal, a more integrated economic bloc to counter authoritarian influence. Reorienting supply chains is costly and disruptive, but the pandemic and Ukraine war exposed the risks of dependency. Defining like-minded partners is tricky, and the shift could create new geopolitical divides. Still, Carney argues the cost of inaction is greater, leaving Canada vulnerable to coercion. Building a resilient network of trusted partners is an investment in security. The Canola dispute is proof that the status quo is unsustainable. Canada must choose resilience over risk. A Canadian pivot to a bloc of democracies would reshape global dynamics. It would signal Canada is choosing sides in the US-China rivalry, hardening geopolitical blocs. This shift would strain Canada-China relations and could trigger further economic retaliation. Decoupling from China would be painful, but proponents argue it's necessary for long-term security. Closer alignment with the US could strengthen North American ties, but risks deeper entanglement in US foreign policy. Canada would trade some autonomy for collective strength. The decision is a high-stakes gamble on the future world order. If Carney is right, a bloc of democracies is the safest path. If not, Canada risks isolation and economic loss. The Canola dispute has forced this question to the forefront. The choices made now will shape Canada's destiny for decades. The Canola dispute is a microcosm of a global trend, the weaponization of economic interdependence. The old theory that trade fosters peace is under threat. Authoritarian states now use trade as coercion, undermining the rules-based system. Businesses and governments must now factor geopolitical risk into every sourcing decision. Strategies like friendshoring and reshoring are replacing pure globalization. The World Trade Organization struggles to resolve disputes rooted in politics, not rules. This erodes trust in global institutions and encourages tit-for-tat retaliation. The world is fragmenting into competing trading blocs. For Canada, open global trade is no longer a given. The canola crisis shows the old assumptions no longer hold. Adapting to this new reality is Canada's central challenge. Most experts agree with Carney geopolitics now shapes economics. Meredith Lilly argues Canada was naive about China, and the canola dispute was inevitable. She supports diversifying trade and building alliances with democracies, but not everyone agrees on the solution. Wendy Dobson warns that cutting off China would hurt Canadian prosperity. She advocates a dual-track strategy: confront on values, cooperate on trade. Critics of friendshoring say it could lead to costly protectionism and is impractical for complex supply chains. Vincent Galoso suggests radical free trade with many partners is the best defense. Despite differences, all agree. The status quo is untenable. The canola crisis shattered the illusion that economics and politics can be separated. Canada needs a new strategic approach to global trade. The era of simply reacting is over. Canada stands at a crossroads. Its response to the canola crisis will define its future. One path: embrace the Carney doctrine, building alliances with democracies for long-term security. This means short-term pain as ties with China are reduced, but greater predictability. Another path: cautious diversification, expanding trade with emerging markets to avoid picking sides. A third option: strategic re-engagement with China, but with eyes wide open and stronger national security. The likely outcome is a hybrid, strengthening alliances while maintaining global opportunities. The key is a coherent foreign policy that integrates economics, security, and values. The canola crisis was a necessary wake-up call. Canada must now forge a new path in a divided world. The choices made today will echo for generations. The future demands clarity, strategy, and courage.